Test, test. Test, test. Test, test. Test, test. Sorry. Hi, everyone. I think it's time to get started. Hearing no objections, let's go on it. So it is my great pleasure to introduce Professor.
Rob, your team's background.
I have no idea what you're talking about. Sorry. So it's my great pleasure to introduce Professor Detlef Stemmer. He is the director for a decade now of the Center for Earth System Research and Sustainability at the University of Hamburg. He is also, since 2019, the chair of the WCRP Joint Scientific Committee. And I'm also very pleased to note the uniqueness of this session, which really highlights links, longstanding links between WCRP and PAGES and PMIP. PMIP and PAGES are kind of joined at the hips. They're about the same age. And PMIP was recently celebrated in the current PAGES magazine issue on the subject of everything that has been achieved and what is hoped to be achieved by these two communities working together, in which a real dialogue has happened that has helped us to bridge perhaps gaps between observational understanding and process understanding. At WCRP, the recent lighthouse activities include, for example, safe landing climates and explaining and predicting Earth system change. And these are really undergirded by the work of PMIP as part of CMIP. And they include not only prediction activities, but also the estimation of high-risk events, of the consequences of a perturbed carbon cycle, of sea level rise, and the idea of doing decadal climate predictability. So with that, I would like to turn it over to Professor Stemmer, and I thank you all for your attendance. I thank him for his comments.
Well, thank you very much, and thanks for this opportunity to speak here, in fact, on behalf of WCRP. And let me actually just try to share my slides now. In fact, you gave already half of my talk, and this I'm really grateful. Yeah, first of all, congratulations to 30 years of PMIP, which is really great, and I think we all can be proud of what has been accomplished, and certainly there's a lot still ahead of us to be accomplished. And the idea behind this talk webinar was really to present to the PAGES community a bit the evolution that took place within WCRP over the last several years related to redesigning our science program, but also changing our structure, and explaining to you how we are planning to move forward, in particular also to identify more enhanced or additional collaborations, opportunities for collaborations. And so the idea is really to stimulate this discussion. And there will be a presentation from my side, and there will be time for a discussion afterwards. Unfortunately, I do have to go into another meeting in 1.5 hours from now. So I will be a little bit quick in summarizing to you the evolution of WCRP that we are in the middle of, and how we want to move forward. And then we will have some time for discussion. First of all, as I mentioned, since in fact 2018, WCRP went through a major revision of the science plan and restructuring. At the same time, or since recently, we also enhanced our discussion with futurists, which PAGES is part of, and really have even a memorandum of understanding that we really want to enhance our collaboration on various different levels within many activities and programs. And to some extent, this really is part of this enhanced collaboration and discussion that we want to have to really move forward together, because the problems we have to solve over the next 10 years are really immense, big, and no one can do this alone. We really have to join forces to move forward. And I hope that some of the discussion that might come out of this seminar will also be along these lines. So let me actually quickly go through a couple of things, some of which might be known to you, or at least some of you, but we also realize often that not everything is known to WCRP, which in fact also had its anniversary a few years ago. It had its 40th years anniversary, and since the last 40 or 40 plus years, the World Climate Research Program WCRP did lead, and it still continues to lead the way in addressing frontier scientific questions related to the coupled climate system. And it's important that W in WCRP really stands for the World Climate Research Program, and indicating that we really try to coordinate and stimulate and move forward really problems that are really big, too big for individual institutions or nations. It's really to do the coordination around the world, bringing all the climate scientists together to address big questions. And in the past, really the first 40 years of WCRP were really dedicated to, first of all, understanding climate variability. And this is where, of course, PAGES really also comes in, because climate variability, studying it, you cannot just wait for the next thousands of years to happen. We really have to build a lot of that on the last many years and the paleo observations. But a very important part, in fact, this is where WCRP was also very important for the entire development that takes place right now, is to identify the impact of humans on climate. So WCRP did many many steps in this direction, which did feed right into IPCC and into this conclusion that humans are impacting climate. In fact, also into decisions that were made during COP events. And 2015, of course, was a very important year in this whole stage of development, where in fact the nations finally decided or agreed on that in fact humans are impacting climate, and where it was very clear that the temperature will keep rising, and that nations in fact decided to try at least to limit temperature rises to 2 degrees or better. Better means lower. And of course, out of these decisions or attempts, a lot of new science aspects evolved. And so including the fact that society now requires really decision-relevant information, evidence-based climate information to support adaptation planning and mitigation strategy. And this is where the climate scientists around the world, and this is not just WCRP, it's Future Earth, and that for PAGES, we really have to now focus on providing answers, urgent answers. We have about 1 decade, maybe 2, to really provide that answer and make an impact and a difference. And I have just a few slides here now that I'm preaching to the choir, I suppose, but it's still worthwhile to go through this to set the stage for also the evolution of WCRP. And of course, a lot of the future work that we have to address is related to the fact that the world is warming, the globe, the Earth is warming. The past 6 years, included 2020, have been the warmest years on record. And 21 is already showing the same tendency. I suppose that 22 will not be too different. It is important to realize all the time that of course climate change and this warming pattern has very strong regional pattern, and these regional patterns evolve, and also for providing actual climate information, that is something we always have to keep in mind. But coming back to global warming, the increase is really due to the rising greenhouse gases, and despite the COP21 decisions to limit global warming, the emissions keep rising. And so we don't really see a big impact yet of the decisions there. And there was COVID-19 having a little dent in the rise, but it's not really visible in a great way. And it's very clear, and this is even clearer after COP26, that to limit global warming to well below 2 degrees above pre-industrial requires a dramatic reduction of CO2 emissions and a dramatic, in fact, a transformation of society. And at this point, I think looking at all the studies, at all the statements that continues come out, it is clear that holding the warming or keeping it at 1 degree, 1.5 degrees appears really as not plausible at this point, given the development that we are seeing. And I think it's up to us to really make these statements loud enough and often enough that it's nobody should believe that it's easy to get this, not even 2 degrees, it's easy. And we have to face a substantial transformation of society if we want to be anywhere there. And I think this is really a challenge to the climate community, the climate research community, to make these statements, but also to develop the information that is required for decision makers to take the next steps. Now, this is out of the IPCC, the 1.5 degree special report from IPCC. And the decision of AR6 is not really different, that given the global warming that we see right now, the surpassing 1.5 degree warming is already happening or expected to happen by 2040, maybe even slightly earlier. And there might be overshoots of 1.5 degrees. Keeping the global warming to 1.5 degrees, it's fairly obvious that without, in fact, negative emissions, it will be very hard or impossible to reach. And it's not even clear if we can limit the global warming to 1.5 degrees. And we all have to work very hard to keep it below 2 degrees or around 2 degrees. And so this is what I said already. The pathways, in fact, how we reach this do matter, because overshoots will have slightly different triggers in the system than having no overshoots and so forth. So going to 2 degrees over 2.5 degrees and maybe coming back later on, of course, will have an impact on ice sheets and so forth. We really have to see which pathways these are, and these needs to be part of our climate research for the futures, to also understand which kind of climate futures are ahead of us, given the different pathways that we don't even know yet which they will be. But it is very clear that the anthropogenic warming, even at 1.5 degrees and be above, will actually lead to significant risks. And we see it already now, and we don't need to wait until 1.5 degree. We see it already now: droughts, heavy rain, flooding. The events that hit Germany a few weeks ago are just examples. Not that I'm stating that these are exactly climate change impacted. There is always this interplay between weather systems and climate change, but it's fairly obvious from what we know that these type of extreme events will increase, and the risk coming associated with these events also will increase, and we really have to deal with this. And I think these are just examples where that WCRP of the problems, the frontiers question that WCRP wants to address in the future. So with a vision that that we will have a world that uses sound, relevant, and timely climate information to ensure a more resilient present and sustainable future of humankind, this is really what WCRP wants to support with its research, which is the attempt to really provide information for society, for decision makers to deal with this and to reach this point. And so WCRP really thought about how to address the problems for the future. And I do want to stress again, we are not alone. We really work with partners together to do this. And the science objective, the steering WCRP's activities over the next decade are stated here, and they are written, in fact, in WCRP's strategic plan. Which include the continuation of fundamental science, really understanding the system better than we do right now, but also going more and more in the development of information, at least providing the basis for developing information. Not that we are a operational system. We are not operational centers. We provide information, and we want to develop the knowledge that is required to provide that information that relates to midterm or short-term predictions. And short-term, I mean here more the decadal scale predictions, and long-term responses of the climate system. And this is, for instance, where the lighthouse activity that Mike just showed, the safe landing climates, comes in. These are the long-term changes that we have to understand. But number four, the fourth objective, is really something that WCRP didn't highlight that much in the past, but it's I think it's something that we have to develop, and not alone, with Future Earth, with International Climate Science Council, and so forth. So bridging climate science and society will become a very important aspect of WCRP's activity and research over the next decade and beyond, because this is really where delivering information to decision makers is as important as it never was, and this will become even more so in the future. Now, implementing this strategy, of course, is something else than just writing a strategic plan. And this is where we have been working on over the last 2 years. And I'm glad that Pascal Bacono is also online, who she's also a member of the scientific committee of WCRP. And so the guiding lines here, implementing the strategy now, is guided by two principles. One is to foster and deliver the scientific advances and future technology required to advance understanding of the multi-scale Earth system, and then quantifying climate risk and opportunities. This is where risks come in, and I have heard that word already today, and also in the preparation of this meeting. And the other one is develop new international, institutional, and scientific approaches required to co-produce cross-disciplinary regional to local climate information for decision support and adaptation, and information and evaluation, to inform and evaluate mitigation strategies. So again, things that information approaches for providing information to decision makers. And along these guidelines, really things that WCRP wants to develop and deliver, we in fact went a step backwards, and we thought about how to prioritize our science, because we all know there's a real urgency now for the next decade and beyond to come up with information that leads to solutions. And so WCRP actually went a step backwards and thought about what kind of big efforts can we make to make a real difference to what is expected from climate science. And also remembering WCRP, the W stands for really the global coordination, like a coordination of a big experiment, like TOGA, like other big experiments in the past that did lead to really step forward. And so with this attention, we thought about big steps that are required now. And this did lead, in fact, to what's called now the lighthouse activities. And you have heard about one already, the safe landing climates. And essentially, WCRP now is pursuing 5 lighthouse activities, and this might be extended by another one in the near future. And I will, in fact, mention to you in a minute or so what this is. Are essentially these 5 lighthouse activities are, maybe I start, well, they are shown here. You can read them. These lighthouse activities are the major and new scientific approaches, technologies, and institutional frameworks required to meet society's needs for robust and actionable climate information. That was really the guiding principles behind it. And I will briefly go through these 5 that you know what they are, and maybe spend a little bit more time on the safe landing and others. And so let me actually just jump over this information. I will come back to this, don't worry. The first one is the explaining and predicting Earth system change. So this is the title already suggests to you or indicates what the content is, what the goal is: to design and take major steps toward the delivery of an integrated capability for quantitative observations, explanation, early warning, and prediction of Earth system changes. So, in fact, while we were developing the acronym, or the little subtitle for this was "What's on Earth is going on." It's really the idea that we understand what is going on right now and what will develop in the future. The timescales are a little bit more the shorter timescales and not really the long ones. This activity is co-led by Kirsten Findell and Rowan Sutton at this point. And so, for instance, and let me see, why is this not stepping forward? So one of the examples is, for instance, explaining hazards that come along, for instance, with tropical storm surges, storms and systems like this. And so where can specialized specific hazards occur? How are hazard locations and other properties modulated by natural variability on interannual to decadal timescales, and how predictable are these modulations? So essentially understanding what can occur now, but also in the future. How has climate change affected the distribution and other properties of specific hazards, and what future changes are anticipated? So these are just examples of what will be addressed in these in this lighthouse activity. And the work includes sort of, there's input, there's integration, there are outputs. And essentially the inputs is monitoring and observing change. So this is where also observations are really important. Modeling the changes and process understanding. So these are all the ingredients coming in. The integration relates to integrated attribution and prediction and projections. So this attribution aspect is really very important, that we understand what comes from what. And then the output would be an assessment of current and future hazards and early warning. So of course we need other input, and that comes from partners and from, for instance, also from the World Weather Research Programs and other activities that really is essential to do so. And the output will be advanced of methods, including reanalysis, improvement of predictions and confidence in these, develop of new capabilities of quantitative observations, explanation, early warning and prediction of the Earth system, and then improve capabilities for quantitative assessment of the global energy, water, carbon budget to underpin climate mitigation policies. I will come back to these budgets, global energy, water, carbon, but it's that I hope you're getting already sensibilized on these topics. So the next lighthouse activity is in fact a safe landing climates, and it's really there to, and I need to move a little bit here my screen part, to explore the routes to climate safe landing spaces for human and natural systems on multi-decadal to millennial timescales. So very much what you just were talking about, I started to talk, connecting climate, earth system, and socioeconomic sciences, explore present to future pathways for achievements of the key SDGs. And you basically see already in this picture what the topics are that are being addressed. There are sea level rise, there's perturbed climate, carbon cycle, there's water resources, there's sustainable development goals, integrated earth system and social modeling, there's mitigation and adaptation, and all really involved in understanding high risk events, but on the long time scales. And so the, hang on, there's, yeah, all these points are spelled out here now on this left column: safe landing pathways, all the things that I mentioned already, to in fact the sea level rise. And this includes the long time scales. I think this is really important. We are talking about the long time scales, where of course PAGES comes in with knowledge, with observations, with also modeling, and again PMIP of course is essential in this aspect. But I hope you see at the end of what my little speech here that it's not just this this lighthouse activity. There are other, in fact, really opportunities that emerge now. And let me quickly go, I will skip over the outcome. You can see that later on, into a few other aspects that might be of interest. The first one is digital Earth. And so in some sense, this is actually the development of a tool. It definitely is at this spirit of what a big experiment would be to move the field forward in a really big way. And that can only be done by international coordination. It's really to develop a digital and dynamic representation of the Earth system, optimally blended model and observations to enable and explore of past, present, and possibly or possible futures of the Earth system. And you see the past, to some extent, this is where also paleo comes in. You see the future, but it's really developing a tool, not that we never did this in the past. I mean, all our model and observational aspects, of course, we're kind of in that spirit, but what is new that we really want to do this now with the best possible realization, like a digital twin of an airplane or of a landing device for the moon, really a tool that allows us to simulate changes in the Earth system. And there are various different aspects along with this, but it definitely is a very big step forward that we, including exascale computing and all the technology development along with that we need to move forward. At this point, Peter Bauer and Christian Jakob are the leads to this. There are already projects now being funded, for instance, in Europe and in other parts of the world, really to push that forward. And if we actually reach the goals that are formulated here within 10 years, I think we would need to make extremely fast-paced and progress. It is a really big problem. And there are aspects here, exascale computing, full integration of policy sectors into the work, open and interactive access of data. Again, all the words that I, to some extent, already heard here today. And there are different strands, different pathways, resolution, traditional modeling, technology is involved here. I mean, many aspects that really need to come into reaching the goals of this lighthouse activity. Moving forward, the number 3 is my climate risk. Again, risks and extremes. And the goal here is to develop a new framework for assessing and explaining regional climate risk, to develop climate information that is meaningful at the local scale. So the difference, for instance, the safe landing, and the leads are at this point is Regina Rodriguez and Ted Shepard. There are purposes for this. There is a vision, there's a goal, as you can read here: make climate information more meaningful at local scale. And the goal is a new approach for regional climate risk assessment, one that starts with a decision context. So really and training the decision makers, the stakeholders, work together with the stakeholders, work on a regional and local scale to have that interaction. And the difference to the safe landing is in particular that the timescales are shorter here. So we go more to the decadal timescales, more on the timescales where decisions are being made right now by decision makers. And the idea is to develop regional labs where basically it's something for South America, something for Europe, something for North America, or even smaller scales, where real work is being done on these regional scales to come up with that information that is required to really develop the risk assessment and come up with recommendations. So the risk is in fact the topic, as you will see here, that reaches through various different lighthouse activities, and that's a reoccurring topic, is going like a network going through all these activities. And examples are here, for instance, that will be addressed, like really droughts in South America. In this case, there are various stakeholders that need that information about droughts and precipitation on different timescales, 2 decades, 5 decades, depending if you're a farmer or if you're an energy supplier or others. And so just to give you examples of what our stakeholders are, with whom we need to work together to make that really happening. Number 4, WCRP Academy. And this is really to determine the requirements for climate research education and to build enabling mechanisms. The Academy will work with WCRP core activities and establish climate educational providers, including universities, to achieve this. And you see here, for instance, there's a marketplace for climate science training. It's not just sort of training the next generation that is more in this box here. It's also training the stakeholders to understand the information that we deliver. We see this, for instance, in the sea level science, where the stakeholders trying to build the harbor or rebuild or secure the harbor of San Francisco don't really understand what our papers are or what our approach to new information and insights are. And I think this is where this training of the stakeholders in using climate science is very important. And this is where we want to work on the regional scale again. For instance, with the previous lighthouse activities, there's really activity emerging together with this academy, but there's also a lot of interest, for instance, from Future Earth, from START, from various other activities in joining in here in these training events. And there's really a huge amount of interest that we see around the world. At this point, the leaders are Angela Maharaja and Chris Leonard leading this forward. And I'm really looking forward to see this evolve and blossom. Can make a huge difference to what we did in the past. Moving forward, these lighthouse activities don't work independently. They, in fact, there are overlapping parts: global change in this corner, regional and change and risk in this part, observations and modeling in this part, are really merging or bringing different lighthouse activities together. And each delivers and specific aspects of the answers that we need to provide to society, but also, in fact, having different inputs from different parts of WCRP. And I think this is very important to understand. First of all, where is the preparation standing? At this point, we do have the science plans for the lighthouse activities. We are continuously evolving these. They will never be cast in stone. They are meant to be dynamic, also in the sense of evolving and further developing, and also in the sense of enhancing the diversity of participation, co-design in the sense of entraining more and more partners, including PAGES. Ensuring they are linked to the WCRP core research activities, so they should not be standalone activities. They really need to be carried forward by WCRP's activities and to some extent those of the partners. And of course, and maybe this is also of interest for you, all the listeners here, the funders actually mentioned already a huge amount of interest in these lighthouse activities. And so there's no WCRP, there's no research really going on without funding. And we seem to have sort of hit a resonance with the funders on various different aspects of the climate research through these lighthouse activities that I think can lead to really very interesting new, also new research opportunities in the field. Now, I said already that of course the lighthouse activities, they are not standalone activities. They are not meant to be like grand challenges working by themselves. They are really meant to integrate the work of WCRP that happens in, for instance, the core projects. Now, core projects will continue, as I will see in a second. They are really important to prioritize research and technology needs. But they will co-develop activities in the lighthouse activities. So they are carrying forward the research in the lighthouse activities. But the core projects are really there to have the homes, we call it in fact homes in some sense, for expertise, for ocean expertise, for cryospheric expertise, for land, for atmosphere, for process studies, observations, modeling, simulations, and they're really important, and you can read it yourself, model data diffusion and so forth, what in fact happens in the core project now, in the past, and in the future. And I think it's very important to understand this, also the logic behind WCRP. In the past, we had 4 core projects. They became brands. In fact, we will carry forward these core projects that you all know from the past. That is CLIVAR, GVEX, CLIC, SPARC, dealing with different parts of the climate system. And PAGES was, in fact, already collaborating with various parts of these, if not all. And I think it might be really important for you to understand, we will carry these core projects forward. They are brands. They are really like funders in the US and otherwise where in the world, they really like these and they will continue the funding. But we actually created 2 more core projects. And I think this is very important to understand. One is we actually combined all the modeling and to some extent observation aspect into what's now called the Earth System Modeling and Observations, and the acronym will be, or is ESMO. And so, for instance, the CMAP, the Working Group on Coupled Modeling, WCNI, WCSIP, all these activities will be in here. And since this is the 30th anniversary of PMAP, of course, the interaction, the collaboration between PAGES and WCRP, essential part will be ESMO on the observational part as well as on the modeling part. And I really highlight the observational part because we really need the paleo observations, and a lot of that will sit in this new core project ESMO. And then there's another core project, a new core project, which is called Regional Information for Society, or in short, RIFS. And this is where we will really develop and flourish the bridging climate information and society, or climate science and society. And the working group on regional climate is in here. The codex is in here, in particular with the aspect on developing regional information. There is, in fact, and I'm not sure if Gabi Hegel is online, the activity on risks and extremes, and a platform on this will be in here. And so again, something where PAGES might in fact have interest in working together. Just a word on the grand challenges. I mentioned them already. Everybody knows the grand challenges because they in fact developed extremely interesting results, including, for instance, the review paper on climate sensitivity that recently came out by Steve Sherwood and others. And so these grand challenges were designed from the beginning as limited lifetime activities. And we will sunset these activities by the end of 22. So a couple of these activities already sort of wind down, and that relates on the research on sea level, for instance, and the cloud circulation, climate sensitivity, all these grand challenges with sunset. But, and I think this is important, the work that is not finished, the aspect that are not finished will in fact be carried forward in either one of the lighthouse activities or in one of the core projects. So we will not drop the important science, but as a structural element of WCRP, this will go away. And so the new WCRP, if you want to sort of understand how this looks in the future, it's actually shown now here. On top, you see our 3 co-sponsors. And this, by the way, is why we have a joint scientific committee. This is a steering committee of WCRP, and it's joint because it's joint for the 3 co-sponsors. That's where the word joint came from, because it really represents all 3 co-sponsors. There's a secretariat supporting that, and there's the lighthouse activities really combining in an interdisciplinary way the research within WCRP, but also with our partners. And then there are the 6 core projects supporting all the work in the lighthouse activities, carrying that forward. So to some extent, actually, some of the work that used to sit, for instance, in GBEX will be carried forward in lighthouse activities, while the core project might carry forward other activities. And then we will have extra work that on the short term, fixed term projects, conferences, and so forth, that still allows us to react in a dynamic way to needs for research that needs to be done, simply because it is urgent and answers are required. So that is the new structure as opposed to this old structure. In fact, our co-sponsor said we are too complex, too hard to understand, and we really wanted to become simpler. And I hope this now looks more attractive and simpler, and also more attractive to the next generation, which often didn't really understand what WCRP was doing. And we are actually in this process of writing this all up, and also explaining to the next generation how to entrain themselves, how to get involved, what urgent research is required now. Now, beyond of what I told you, there's actually more urgent stuff that is needed to be addressed. And so a couple of these questions are just written down here, and you can read them, but I want to highlight a few. And these are now the emerging new topics that we are still in the process of placing them in the right way in the new structure. One is the global cycles and budgets of heat, freshwater, carbon. And most likely this will be done between all these activities, also including the lighthouse activities. There is now an activity spinning up, and I highlight this here now as number 2. It's a climate intervention, and for instance, solar is already involved. So it will be done with futures, dealing with different parts, also with the carbon cycle, maybe carbon sequestration, but also addressing and not provoking or promoting, in fact, I should say, solar radiation management, but really trying to provide the answers that somebody needs to have. We really need to understand what dangers are also involved in this. Isn't this why we want to address this? Because politicians, even on the UN level, there's more and more really calls for, give me answers. What can we do with climate interventions? And I think we as a community, we are really charged with providing the information that is required, that also highlights the danger in it. And this is really our driver behind this. And then there's something spinning up, which is called GPEX, the Global Precipitation Experiment, Global Precipitation Research. That is to some extent already spinning up from the funders in the US, and WCRP decided to take it on and coordinate this on the international level. And of course, the freshwater cycle, the availability of water will be extremely important over the next decades. And this is where we might even spin up another lighthouse activities. And at the end, I mentioned already extremes and risks. And this goes, in fact, through various different activities. And there might be kind of an integrating working group, really bringing, managing all the activities within WCRP and outside with our partners on this topic. So that will be emerging, and that will come in some extra form into the structure. And I will just jump over these because time is running out. But for instance, just why we want to enter the question about the energy cycle, the budgets, not just energy, also heat and carbon, in fact, they are coupled. We have to deal with them in some ways. And they are related, for instance, to heat waves, not just on land, but also in the ocean. It's more and more clear that the ocean experiences heat waves as well, that, for instance, for corals are extremely dangerous. And we really have to understand how these will evolve in the future. For sea level, of course, heat content rise is very important for the reaction of the ice sheet. The long-term risk really in sea level change and rise sits in the ice sheets, and we have to understand this. And so just to give you a feeling why we have to enter these extra activities. And so how we move forward, we are in the end of 21, we are in the process of writing our science implementation plan that will be available early next year. And that will, in fact, now really lead then into the way forward. At the same time, and this might be really interesting also for PAGES, for the community, is that we are in the process of organizing the second WCRP Open Science Conference. There was one in Denver almost 10 years ago, or in fact 10 years ago. And with the COVID problems, we are a little slow, but we are planning now for an Open Science Conference to take place in 23, second half of 23. We are in the process of identifying the venue in the Global South, ideally. And so that will be decided on early in 22, where this will be. And the program committee started to work. In fact, we will have next week our meeting on deciding how to do this. It will be a conference that will be a post-COVID-19 type of conference. It will be different. We have to reduce the carbon footprint. We still have to have a central facility, but also satellite facilities. We have to have really a hybrid format of a conference, which will be extremely interesting to organize, kind of really the next generation of climate conferences, with maybe satellites in Europe, in Asia, in wherever, around a central facility in the Global South. And it will be extremely interesting to organize this and then run it. And I'm pretty sure that this the conference like this will be also of interest to PAGES. And so with this, I want to come to a close to give us also time for answering questions and a little discussion. I do have to be in the next meeting 30 minutes past the hour. But the idea is really to enter a discussion. And again, Futures and WCRP really want to work much closer together than this was the past, the case in the past, addressing SDGs, doing this together. We know the problems are big. We know we have to bring in all the expertise from both sides, and we want to do this in a harmonic way. And so I think this really provides a really good ground for new activities, for new fruitful collaborations. And so to stimulate the discussions, I listed a couple of things here. In fact, we heard that already from Mike: lighthouse activities, special safe landing, where PAGES can come in, the risk topic, including also sea level and the ice sheet behavior of Antarctica. Core projects always collaborated with PAGES. Something like CLIVAR, and for instance, with Pascal and I, we were on the CLIVAR SSG for some years. So Pascal always brought in the PAGES point of view. She now is providing this on the JSC of WCRP. And of course, these are really mechanisms of where the also the collaboration can be enhanced. And I just mentioned a few minutes ago, kind of the new core project ESMO and how PMIP can come in here, but also the paleo observations and how we can bring this forward. And with this, I would like to close my my little presentation and open the floor for questions, but also for a larger discussion. I'm not sure who will monitor the, moderate the discussion or monitor the questions, but I'm here to answer your question. And maybe I just stop sharing my slides.
Yeah, I can start moderating the questions, but I have to go in 10 minutes, and I'll pass it over to Marie-France, who will continue. I want to thank you for broad overview and showing how WCRP and PAGES and PMIP are so connected, and there's so much synergy to work together. There was a question that came up in the chat from Gavin Schmidt very early on, and he was asking, what's the difference between a digital Earth and a modern reanalysis? I wondered if you could just address that as people are thinking of questions. Thanks.
Well, first of all, there's a question, what is a modern reanalysis? And so you have a reanalysis in the atmosphere or in the ocean. People now start to work on a coupled reanalysis, but that's, I'm not sure if that is modern in the sense of ideal. And so we are far away from this. The digital Earth is really meant to be various different things. It's not just modeling, it's also observations and actually providing observations on a fine scale resolution. So also bringing the observing system forward. But at the end, the idea is to merge observations and the models through data assimilation. And that's where modern reanalyses might apply. But there's a huge amount of work to be done to do this and to develop this. And we basically have, for instance, in the industry, always, well, in the past we had mechanical twins to something where you can play with and understand processes should something go wrong. Nowadays, it's in fact done also in a numerical way, for instance, for cars, for airplanes, for many things. And to some extent, this is what the idea behind our climate models was for many decades. It's not that new, but the new part is we really want to become really sophisticated now, so that highest possible resolution in observations and in modeling, better parameterization, better physics, and highest amount of technology that includes exascale computing. And so maybe the idea is not new. It's definitely not what we have in modern reanalyses. And I think it's maybe the goal that we all have, but realizing it. Well, Gavin, business as usual in the sense that maybe the goal is the same. But I think there's a lot of technology development that is required to do so on various levels. And that I think makes a difference, that to some extent we also have the technology now at hand.
Another question came up from Pascal, who I agree is just perfectly positioned to see this this nexus between projects. He asked, how could paleoclimate observations and modeling be used to inform the prediction of our system change on decadal timescales? There's a description in the science plan for WCRP describing predictions and modeling, massive amount of modeling from the last few decades for the purpose of the next few decades. And so I'm wondering your thought on whether there's opportunities to expand that. Thanks.
Well, I'm not sure if that is a question for me or for Pascal herself. She's on the JSC, and of course, Pascal, you can answer this. But it's actually a very interesting question, and of course, it depends on what timescales you are talking about. Decadal prediction is one aspect. The longer-term prediction is yet another aspect, where it might be even more obvious, where the paleo information can come in. For the decadal, it depends on what you can resolve, and it's just that. Looking into the observations, climate observations that we have, the numbers of observations going back after 50 years in the ocean, there's not much. And on land, it might be slightly better, but it's fairly obvious that the longer we go back, the thinner it becomes, and the more we rely on paleo information, for instance, to resolve a decadal timescales on how that changed. And so I think it's fairly soon that we need to rely on more and more paleo information, even to resolve the decadal variability, to understand it, first of all, to test if we can resolve it in our predictions, and then maybe use it also in other contexts. But and the same holds, of course, for the longer time scales. But of course, for me, I agree, and this is a typical argument we learn from the past to understand the futures. But of course, we never come from the same angle. And I personally would really like to discuss this, to what extent, how much we can learn and how different the future might be from what you can conclude from the paleo information, simply because we have a different starting point. We have a different history behind us. And for instance, you can have the same temperature, but completely different ice cryospheric situation, running into a different evolution of the system. And I think this is really what we have to understand jointly, to what extent we can just use paleo information to sort of project, or to what extent that diverges. And I think this is really where the joint discussion is required. Not sure if this answered your question, Pascal. You still have your hand up.
Yes, I raised my hand just to be more precise on my question. Sometimes that left to be there and discuss with the paleo the different plants in WCRP. The question for me is that's clear that when we look at the new plants, paleoclimate is welcome in safe landing climate, and I suppose there will be discussion for it, because this safe landing has some vision of long-term scales and things like that.
It's already in there. So for instance, for the sea level
it's already
part,
in there, but it can be more of how people do not necessarily know, and that's the point. But the point for me is that for PAGES, for the explanation on what is going on, I would say, it's clear that people start from what is going on today. And the vision is mostly of explanation using today's variable or today's modeling or the present day periods. And I'm really wondering or are really thinking that paleoclimate can certainly do something even to explain some of the events going on today. And maybe the paleo community should think about it and find a way to join this group a little bit more.
Yeah, I really like this comment, but I think the first step might be also for you guys to define how you understand paleo, because everybody hearing paleo thinks about cores that you drill or ice cores and stuff like this. And so really highlighting and explaining to the community what the so-called paleo observations can in fact deliver for understanding present changes. I think that would be already very enlightening, and then it's much easier to draw it in even over the last 10 years, if that is useful. But as I said before, you cannot understand decadal changes just from the last 10 years of data. You need a couple of decades to understand decadal variability. And this is where paleo data come in immediately. So to some extent, it's kind of the last few years, or in fact the shorter timescales. And I think explaining the use in particular to understand the shorter timescales, but looking into the past, I think that's already the first fairly obvious point that one can or should make. That's why I think I'm getting the paleo information into ESMO and into the analysis of all the variability is absolutely critical for us.
I think there's a huge role from the in the study of the historical climate observations too, that kind of bridges in between the modern observation systems and the, and the paleoclimate. I'm going to turn the moderation over to Marie-France and thank everyone for their participation. Unfortunately, I have to go.
Thank you, Mike. So I will try to take over. Pascal, do you still have something to say? Your hand is still raised.
Yeah, so maybe I have something to say.
Yes, go on, please.
So I suppose we will have a discussion after that, and it's very important that everybody in this room have a chance to say something or to write comments, but maybe it's a question for that left, because that's what is difficult for people in general, is you will laugh when I say that, is to find the door. So we know that we can collaborate and so on, but for people in the room, then they need to understand maybe how they can join. what's the mechanisms and how they can organize themselves to produce a proposal, for example, to get to be involved a little bit more.
Yeah, I think this is a very important a question that of course has very different angles also to think about it. And the door, yeah, there are many doors, and so one of the reasons why I in fact gave this little summary of the new, what I would call the new WCRP to you, is in fact to first of all understand what new opportunities are there. And so once you understand the opportunities, then you might find already one door. So for instance, knowing that the lighthouse activity on safe landing does include the long time scales, we do have paleo people on that science steering committee, first of all, writing the science plan. But of course, there's always the opportunity to join one of these science committees and help organize. For instance, for the safe landing on, if there's sea level aspect, there are other aspects in there where immediately there might be an overlap. And I think identifying these where maybe PAGES has similar activities, and then bringing these together and through a joint working group or joining as ex officio or otherwise, the WCRP committees would be one way to come in. Finding the opportunities and knocking at the door, for instance, in this case, talk to Steve Sherwood and Gabi Hegel, where a participation can take place. And of course, the lighthouse activities just organize. They coordinate as well, and there will be real science emerging. So there will be calls. There's, for instance, a special session at the AGU. And of course, you can all join with your funded organizing or your funded projects and your work already in joining into these scientific discussions. And I think this often is a very nice extra door, additional door that you bring in your activity wherever the topic allows it or suggests it, that you come in and have a discussion. When we have a meeting organized, a workshop organized, or a special session at the AGU or otherwise, or at the Open Science Conference. And then, of course, we do have our working groups and steering teams like Clivar, Pascal. You may speak actually to this from your own experience, how you found the door and went into the door and become a member of WCRP. And of course, this is another way to participate. But often it's the easiest way to start with your own research and come to our meetings and show the results and involve yourself in the discussion, or in fact provide stimulations for maybe a worker group or joint activity. So to some extent, I might have mentioned already 3 different doors, but Pascal, maybe you do have an answer to your own question. How you involved yourself in WCRP as a paleo person?
Well, for me, it was quite simple in practice. People who have seen the record from the PMIP 30th anniversary, you see what happened here in Saclay in 91. So PMIP was decided, and it was decided finally in between the 2 communities somehow. So that's why finally for the modeling and modeling developments and all the common exercise, that's clear is completely connected to WCRP and the linkages with lots of paleo climate record data synthesis and model data comparison. It's so part of it is in PAGES and part of it is clearly in between the 2. So that's I'm maybe not the best example in this. So my feeling is that it's clear that people have a different organization, and I really believe that there are lots of work in the PAGES working group that is directly relevant to lots of things going on in WCRP, and in particular these lighthouse activities. And for I'm following a little bit what is going on in the safe landing. And I thought Gabby would be there, so but I think she's not. So, for example, if I tell you what is in safe landing climate, there is first a question, a very fundamental question is, how we define this safe landing is not that easy. So you need to discuss about the metrics you need, the pathways you have, because we in some region or for some question we are already not safe, and how you discuss between the different communities. There is something going on with tail risks. So what are these risks? How we do look at them? What the paleo can tell us about it is very important in there, because all the records are too short for that. And how we envision this question, if it can happen or not, and what is particularly important, and if that can be mitigated. There's a lot on the land and carbon. So lots of people also working on that in PAGES for all the trust cases and the connection with the land use, and even the time scales in the land surface for the soil, the vegetation, and so on, and the connections. There is one we would like to push, and we need also paleo people is the leakages with water and water availability, because you need people understanding the risks attached to water, not only the climate, but also for the environment. So there is a lot in
including ice sheets.
Yes, and also with the ice sheets, and also you need people that knows about teleconnections in the climate system, and are able to connect the large scale and the smaller scales together. So it's really a big something, and we need quite a lot of people joining these activities. And then there is an obvious one, of course, with sea level, and it's already on the way, as Detlef said. But there's also other question coming in now, the sea levels and regional focus in there, and all the question for the coast. So quite a lot with WCRP in there. And I remember, I don't see why, yes, as part of the risk, there's things going on with forest system, for example, and also the fire. And there has been already quite a lot of activities with fires in PAGES. So for me, at this stage, it's more a question for the PAGES communities and all the working group, if they think they can find a mechanisms, also ideas of how to better interact, so that the work they are doing resonates in what will be done in these lighthouse activities. And the important point is that each community feels as an owner of the activities. It's not WCRP or PAGES in that case. It's really a community work working together.
Yeah,
I think this in particular, I mean, these are all very important points, particularly the last one. I think it's very important to stress this. WCRP and PAGES, we are both coordinating work. We are stimulating work. We're also stimulating the funding, but at the end, it's actually all the scientists, and we are the climate community carrying the work forward. And so I think this is very important, that we try to provide the ground for yourself, for your own work to flourish, and help you in this, and help also stimulating the funding. But otherwise, we are just trying to organize and coordinating this work, maybe also by identifying new challenges and so forth, where then the funders will jump on, like we did, in fact, with our new structures. But otherwise, we are the same community.
Yeah, but I think well, I mean, with PMIP, PAGES and PMIP as for a long time has been working together, in the sense that we have, for several working groups, similar interests, reconstructing the climate over the Holocene, over the last glacial maximum, over the interglacials and so on. So there is, we are very close to each other, PMIP and PAGES, I think. And quite often there are people connecting, and it's already working quite well. And I was really wondering what we can do in practice to make these things happening more with WCRP, with other aspects of WCRP. So not only with PMIP, but also with the others. Because, well, of course, Pascal and you, Detlef, you mentioned many groups in PAGES that can be interested in connecting with WCRP. And you say, well, you can enter, there are meetings and so on. But nevertheless, how to make these first steps? I mean, we have many groups in PAGES. We have a group on climate variability across scales that could probably work also with other groups in WCRP working on variability as well. But clearly the information is not going through the boundary between the two groups. There is no close interactions, and also sometimes I have the feeling, and it's in both ways. I'm not saying it's the fault of PAGES or the fault of WCRP, but when there is a meeting and the other party is invited, it's only 1 or 2 people in a mass of 200 participants, for example. And so the information, well, it's a very small contribution. It's not something on a par. So I'm really wondering how we can improve that.
Well, but yeah, I mean, this is looking at PMIP, for instance, and analyzing why it was such a success. Bringing in the debate here, for instance, the sea level conference in New York in 2017, we had many paleo people there, not just 1 or 2. And so I think there are good examples. There may be less good examples, but using PMIP as one example where both sides decided we need to work on this. I think that right now is the moment, and Pascal mentioned already a couple of topics where we have to decide jointly. We need to work together on this or that topic, and then we can set up, for instance, a joint activity that really is co-owned by both sides, as for instance we do with the climate interventions with solars. So I think identifying these from your sides, from our sides, Pascal sits on our JSC and can carry the information also forward, that we in fact create joint activities, that we identify co-ownership and a co-design from both sides to move this forward. I think it's much easier than doing it in hindsight. And that's why looking at where we are going right now with WCRP, and if for instance, PAGES can see this is where we're also active, and then we bring people together to work together on these or bring them on the panels. That's what I would suggest, and to really go along the PMIP success story and try to repeat this.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, well, go on if it's on, because there is another question from Nikita that is on another point. And so maybe she would like to ask the question, but maybe you want to add on the previous point.
Yes, I would like to add on this point, because there are other examples, for example, in CLIVA, so it's not directly the Lighthouse in that case. In CLIVA, there is no research focus group on the tropical basin interactions, and there is a connection with paleo people in there.
Yes,
it was the case at the meeting, and I know they're working also to try to figure out how to better share the paleoclimate data. So if there's someone in the room from this group, it could be nice to hear about it. There are lots of other examples of, for example, for me, I've been quite involved in the ANSO groups, for example, in CLIVA, in the tropical Pacific basin. So there are lots of examples everywhere. Maybe what we're missing is a complete view of these activities.
Yeah, so it might in fact look better than what Marie-France just said. I mean, this is this would be in fact nice to understand how much is already going on and where are the opportunities that we make this. Of course, I don't think we want to suggest at this point that we merge it all together, but identifying the obvious interfaces where things would be a mistake not to pursue it together.
Nikita, do you want to ask your question, or shall I read it?
Maybe you go ahead, my friends. It's loud around me.
Okay, so is there a part of WCRP that also interacts with non-academic private players? For example, monitoring devices being deployed by shipping company that collect information of ocean parameters that would be valuable for academia, or alternatively consultancy companies that do climate risks analysis and provide climate services that maybe don't use paleoclimate data as much. Perhaps some data assimilation products are how they interact with paleoclimate, something we can provide. Do you know?
Well, I mean, there's a question
anything?
about the more general questions, and then there's a paleo data question here.
Yes.
First of all, WCRP, particularly through CLIBAR, is working since decades with IOC, the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission, on the observing system and GOOS. And so the observing system was set up jointly between these two organizations. And historically, for instance, we use merchant ships to do observations in the ocean. So that already goes in the direction of what you asked there. But in this case, we use the platform, and we still put scientists or students on, for instance, merchant ships to launch XPTs from there. And there's more and more this citizen science, for instance, sail yards to do ocean observations, or even using animals to do ocean observations. So there's something going on in this direction, and more also there are private companies providing drones. And so we, for instance, have sail drones now where the observations belong to the company. It's actually a very interesting model. I'm not sure how this works, but I think this is expanding. To what extent paleo data are involved, I don't know. Maybe that's where you can say something. But from an observing standpoint, there is more and more of this evolving. I think there's a question about quality. And so, for instance, having yachts just taking observations without a calibrated instrument, it's not always clear how good these observations are and how much you can make use of them. But some of the development goes in this direction. If you want to have a group photo with me before I leave, I do actually have to leave in about 5 minutes, so you might need to do this at some point.
Yeah, thank you. Well, maybe it would be nice to have some words from those here in this virtual room about their experience in connecting. Well, I guess most of you are in the paleo community, on how you are connected with WCRP in general, or with specific experience, or if you already had, I don't know, workshops or common activities.
Marie, what I really would like to hear is if anybody tried but was rejected, or it wasn't successful, and really learning where in the past there was an obstacle, because that's what Pascal and I can in fact take forward and fix it. I don't see any hand.
No, although there must be in the room some leaders of PAGES working group, I would guess, or okay, well,
because otherwise the answer to your previous questions is that maybe your SSG and our SSG should identify really where the interfaces are and where obvious topics needs to or should be pursued together, that we can set up the proper appropriate links and arrange for this. I don't think anybody would refuse to do so. It's more identifying the obvious topics.
Massa.
Yes, I don't know if so many people tried, because I think so many of us are trying to look for money or funding, and unfortunately this is preventing from taking part in more collective actions which are absolutely necessary for us. So it was so maybe that's a sign of this. I wanted to go back to the academy, because that's the I can't remember how it was called, the Climate Academy, right? I think paleoclimate has the power to really show the impact of climate change, because that's how it is recorded in a way, and maybe it's not used so much this way, and maybe it's something that that we should think collectively about. So I haven't followed really how the different academies are building up now. Would they be interested in having some paleo knowledge on paleo on board? Do you know, Detlef?
Well, I do not know specifically, but I would be very surprised if not, and I would not know why not. It is really about training of the next generation, and we both have to train our next generation. It is about training the climate information users, and of course, any information about the past is absolutely important. And the academy, in fact, is where futurers are absolutely interested and others are absolutely interested in. And so I think that would be definitely a very nice portal to bring paleo information in. And again, nobody of us, Cliver, I mean, we all work with paleo information. Nobody rejects that. That's might be more a point of highlighting this more and yeah, bring it in also on the academy level. And that's you have seen on the slides, and I can provide the slides. You have seen the leads, and through the WCRP website, you can always reach the secretariat and the leads to make these suggestions. I think the doors are wide open, in particular in this respect.
Thank you. So I think we'll have a group picture before you go, and we have a little souvenir, so if people can switch on their camera.
Hello everyone, so we are going to have indeed a group picture, so if you could have your camera open for the picture, please. So to open your camera, it's on the bottom left, the camera icon. So I see some camera, thank you. If you have trouble opening, you can also check with the arrows next to the camera icon, which goes up, if you have different cameras which will be available. Okay.
And it's really nice to see your faces, actually.
Yes, that's nice. So please, a little bit more people. I don't
nice
have
to see Ayako. I mean, she actually was on the Grand Challenge sea level for some time.
Yes. It's starting to be late in Tokyo, I guess.
So I don't see if we'll have more. Okay, a little bit more camera.
Thank you all.
Okay, so smile. Okay, it's good for me. Do we have more people joining? I don't think so. Okay, then it's good for me.
Okay, so I thank you again for this opportunity to speak. As we said before, Pascal is always there as an interface. Whatever you whisper in her ear will reach me definitely, and vice versa. So we should use it, and otherwise the dialogue should actually increase. And I think we are really interested in that.
Thank you. Thank you again, Detlef, for taking the time to explain to all of us what is the new structure of WCRP, and to highlight the different places where paleo could potentially contribute. And yes, I hope that we will find the way to the door, as Pascal said, so that, well, we will continue to work together and to strengthen this collaboration. And well, I think it can only be useful. Thank you again.
Absolutely. Thank you, and looking forward to the interaction. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you. Yeah, so I think if you like, we can continue this discussion on, yes, where do we see us as paleo people, where we want and what we want to do to, or if we want really to contribute more or to collaborate more with the WCRP. Is there, what would be the place to do that? What would help? How can any structure help to do that? Is there anything that you feel is missing in this connection with WCRP? Or maybe you think that there is no point of doing that, we can do our paleo stuff on our side and they can do whatever they want on their side and there is no need for any connection. I would be happy to hear your opinion, because for the moment we heard a lot, Pascal, and that's fine. But I would like to hear the others. What do you think in the room?
Sorry, my friend. Sorry, Pascal, did you want to go ahead?
I thought someone was before me. No, no. There are already several questions that has been raised in different meetings, and even I come back to the Cliver meeting in 2016, so when we had this PAGES Cliver town hall. And part of this question, there was clearly a plea for paleo people, for present day people, to have more isotope observations for present day and things like that. So it's it's very important. There has been discussion quite a lot about what is this pre-industrial, and that maybe also, that's my feeling, but maybe that finally the pre-industrial we're using for civil simulation is not the right one. My feeling is that our Millennium simulations and Millennium view should be better, but I'll let you judge that. So there are lots of questions like that where there really is a way to think how the paleo can be really effective, on which questions and where we have interest to have more connections on key subjects, of course. And I see that Gavin is there.
Nikita,
Gavin, you were chairing on one stage the PAGES Cliver intersection, so maybe you have some views about it, what was already missing, what you think is still missing, or whatsoever.
Yeah, so you know, the PAGES Cliver intersection, you know, that was a very useful project for a while, and the people that were involved, I think, you know, everybody kind of had, you know, very specific things that they wanted to get out of that interaction. You know, one of the things that we focused on was you know, how to really kind of tie in the paleo modeling to the future projections in a coherent and kind of, you know, a way that you could do it, you know, directly, so that you could have the paleo verification or evaluation feed directly into what you were going to say for the future. And I think that has become a little bit mainstream, so it isn't such a shock to think that should be happening anymore. And so kind of when we were done with that, and we had a couple of workshops on that was very successful. There was some nice papers that came out of that. It wasn't that you know, I think it kind of ran out of steam at that point. But I think something similar you know, could be a useful vehicle for some of the newer initiatives, and particularly on getting them done and facilitating those connections. You know, you can't, like these working groups, you know, can't actually do directly anything because they have no money, but the workshops can bring, you know, the key people together in very productive ways if there's a plan, and when there is a plan, I think you can you know, you can execute it and you can make it work. You know, I don't think we need more committees just to have meetings where people give the same presentations that they always give. But I think if there's a real task at hand, if there's a real product required, these can be a great initiative to get those things done.
Thank you. Nikita, you wanted to add something, or is it something different?
No, it was on the same, but it wasn't anything important. I just wanted to fill the silence. It was just to say that so I get news from Pages and I get news from Clivar, like the mailing list. And it just seemed that Pages was more Europe academic, sort of European academicians seem to be part of Pages, and then American academicians seem to be part of Clivar, but they seem to be doing very similar things. So I would follow both, and both were nice, but I don't know why I had this perception that they were different, and there's no reason why they shouldn't be similar or more connected.
Well, I don't know the answer to your question about Clivar, but I have the feeling that there is Clivar. Well, maybe Pascal, you can say if I'm wrong or not, but I have the feeling that there is Clivar within WCRP, but on the top of that, there is a US Clivar. But I'm not sure if I'm right. Does anyone know something more than me?
No, I'm interested in these comments. So I'm not sure I understand where it comes from, but it's very interesting to hear your comments.
No, it was just like, for some reason, the jobs were all listed that were for American universities. And then I think we have Pages ECN, which is the early career network. And then Clivar had YES, but YES had a lot of American members. It just seemed like a thing, like not. Yeah, so I was already a part of Pages, so I didn't try for WCRP so much because I thought I was sort of replicating, but just with a different community. And because I was in like academic institutes on this side, so I stuck with Pages. But yeah, it's interesting to see.
Yeah. Does anyone? Oh,
yes,
sorry,
maybe I can say also that safe landing. So I'm just following it, but it's mainly Gabi Hegel and Steve Sherwood. They have launched a series of webinars. So I think you've seen the advertisement. It's something that is done in practice with AIMS, and the objective was really to discuss a little bit these limits. What we call safe landing, what's a different question. So it's also maybe something where the panel could provide ideas about those webinars and a question that could be treated in one of those webinars and suggest people for the presentation. So it's a way also to interact more. Because to start with, at least Safe Landing didn't want it to have more workshop and things before we really know how to tackle the questions and bring people together.
I don't know if the question or no, it's not a question, it's a suggestion from Marie-Alexandrine, if it is related to safe landing or not, but she's writing cost of vulnerability might provide topics of collaboration with the paleoclimate community. Do you want to add something on that, Marie-Alexandrine, or someone else?
Well, maybe, yeah, I was making this suggestion, although I mean, I don't have clear ideas on this, but Well, the paleo community has been working more and more in coastal regions because they provide a suitable archives for resolving decadal scale variability. And we've been working recently on reconstructions of paleo floods, paleo tsunami, even paleo storms. And therefore, I thought this could be topics of collaboration between the paleoclimate community, especially with regard to what the left mentioned on topics like science, society, and policy issues in the context of the UN decade.
Thank you. Does anyone else have another idea or a further development of an idea on questions? Because, well, it seems that the key point of this discussion right now is to identify key questions that both community, WCRP and PAGES could tackle together. Massa, you wanted to add something?
Yes, I wanted to go back to digital twins, because when I saw this word, and there was Gavin's question, echoed this word, I think a lot of us are understanding these two words differently. I thought I was dealing with digital twins a long time ago already by manipulating and making simulations with climate model, even for paleoclimates. And after a while, I understood that this was not what was meant by digital twins. My feeling is that it's very much oriented for the moment, to high resolution, so to some degrees of realism in a way of the climate system. But then this is at the expense of length of simulations or number of simulations, and I think that's some things that we can contribute to. And so maybe also having a different view on what a digital twin is and what we can bring in terms of analysis of different scenarios, uncertainties, or climate sensitivities should be somewhere in this activity. I don't know what you're feeling, but I was a little bit shocked when I first saw that. So maybe we shouldn't worry about it, or maybe we should. I don't know. What's your opinion about it, everybody?
Well, I must say that I was also puzzled with what could be digital Earth, digital twins, or so. It's something that is not very clear to me yet. Yeah, well, I at first I was thinking that it was more a full integration of the Earth system, not only climate aspect, but social aspect as well, and human activities, and well, everything, just yeah, a twin of the Earth as it is right now, but I don't know.
I can just say that, as far as I understand, at the end, with all the discussions going on in WCRP with that, it's a multiform something. So on one hand, for WCRP, it's clear there is something with frontier simulations, I would say, whatever resolution you have, it's really the frontier one. There is what that Leva said, with lots of things about assimilations and how you bring model and data together. And of course, there is lots of things going on with all the informatics and computers, and be more effective to make sure that the developments can be useful for the community. Behind all the ideas people are discussing in general, you see this very high resolution something coming in. And you see also lots of better use of artificial intelligence. So most of the time is machine learning, right? To go one step further. So it can be an extension of the model. It can be another way to connect with biochemical or something else models you need for impact studies. or to bring them more together, or have more flexible way to interact between these different types of numerical tools. The paleo in there, for part of it, is a very good example of all the complexity you need to grab to be able to have a digital, so it's not called twin exactly in WCRP, it's called digital earth. All these things working together to go from one scale to the other, or to have more than just the climate in terms of physics and biochemical cycle. That's the idea behind that. And it will be more of a forum, whereas the more normal activities we are all doing and connect together will be in the different core projects. At least that's why I understand at this stage of what is going on.
Yeah, thank you. I'm sure that there will be more coming and that we will hear more about all these activities, lighthouse activities and core project and so on, just to, well, also that Detlef mentioned more to come. So I'm sure that we need to keep up to date. So, well, I'm not sure if we should continue. So anyway, I think that the key message right now is just to identify questions, and I don't know exactly who should do that. That could be tackled from both parts, from Paleo and from WCRP, who is more present and future. And then, well, with those questions, trying, as Gavin said, having something more practical where people can meet and discuss on those questions and move forward, and not so much on organizational, administrative, and so on. So, well, I guess that's the point that we reached now at this stage. But I'm sure that we need to continue to think about it, and maybe all of us in our own groups and activities, that we need to think and to identify where we can have this connection, because I really think that it is important. It is probably not the only one, but it is one way to make Paleo useful for decision making, for the whole community, for the world. And so I think that it is a path for being known as Paleo. So it's how I see the next step in this discussion. Pascal, I think I cannot see you.
Yeah, the comment I would like to make is that the way the lighthouse has been decided is through intense discussion between groups of people who have highlighted that some question really needs more to be tackled with the wider groups, and it's really key topics where we should make a difference in a few years. That's what Detlef said. And then for me, it could be nice if the Paleo recognizes itself in these different topics and think along these lines, and have a proposal in terms of science, what the Paleo could bring in there, and the different groups, and knowing what people will do in the next years and so on, and where they want to join. It's really a way to think about it. It will help, I suppose. As you said, it's not necessarily organization. It's really willing to do the science because of the question, and make sure everybody knows that people want to do this, and they are ready to go to a meeting on a particular topic. And it's also where we would like to engage quite a lot the younger generation, because normally that's some of the topics where there will be really new results and new things to do.
It may be also a point of thinking of inviting to our meeting those who are working more on present and future. And giving them also the floor to explain what they are doing, and not only of us going to their meeting, just making space for them as well to present their work. Okay, well, I think...
Yes, exactly. And for PMIP, it's the same. For the PMIP working groups, they have some thinking on they can what they're already doing, what maybe this gives them ideas to go one step further for some of the questions.
Yeah. Okay, well, if there is no urgent question or a burning comments, remark, I think we will close this session here. So to give you some time to stretch your legs, drink some things or eat something, depending on where you are and what you are doing right now or what you want to do. And so I think the next session is starting in 15 minutes, if I'm right. So I thank you very much for your participation, contributions, and attendance to the meeting. And I hope that you learn interesting things from WCRP and that it will help you to connect more with them. So thank you very much all for being there. And happy birthday, PMIP.
Thank you, Marie-France.